Is it possible to know that God exists? Philosophers and theologians would answer yes. And one way in which they demonstrate God's existence is through arguments. One of those arguments is the moral argument for God's existence. What exactly is the moral argument? I'm joined today by Christian scholar Dr. Travis Campbell to help answer that question. Travis, what is the moral argument for God's existence?
The moral argument is often given as a deductive proof for the existence of God, and it's very simple in its formulation. Two premises and a conclusion. First premise, if God does not exist, then objective moral values and principles do not exist. Premise two, objective moral values and principles do exist. Therefore, the conclusion is that God does exist.
Now, how can we be confident that this is a valid argument?
Well, the argument, and incidentally, the most popular rendition of this argument is probably William Lane Craig's. He's given this version of the argument in many debates. And you'll notice that no philosopher that's debating on this topic is questioning the validity of the argument, because it's clearly following the logical law of inference called modus tollens, fancy Latin term just for the way of negation. What you do in modus tollens is you deny the antecedent for the purpose of denying you deny the consequent for the purpose of denying the antecedent. So the first premise is, if God does not exist, then objective moral principles or values do not exist. Then we deny that consequent. Objective moral values and principles do exist. And then, of course, you deny the antecedent and the conclusion, therefore God exists. So it follows modus tollens perfectly.
Okay, so it's a valid argument. But you were mentioning to me off the air that there's a difference between the validity of an argument and the soundness of the argument. Could you help unpack that?
Sure. Here's a valid argument. If Travis Campbell does not exist, then objective moral values and principles do not exist. But objective moral values and principles do exist. Therefore, Travis Campbell exists. Now, that's a perfectly valid argument, but I think very few people, including myself, would grant the soundness of it. The soundness of an argument speaks to the truthfulness of the premises. Validity is saying, if these principles are true, then the conclusion automatically follows. But soundness indicates that the principles or the premises are, in fact, true to begin with. Most people, including myself, reject premise one of that second argument that I gave you for Travis Campbell's existence. Although many people would affirm premise two, they would reject premise one. But I think the moral argument for God's existence is not only valid but sound, precisely because the premises are true.
So then in the next episode, what we'll do is we'll demonstrate to our viewers why the moral argument for God's existence is a sound argument.
Very good.